Welcome to All Things Keto. I am your host, Dr. Pete. I am a PhD biochemist and a certified health coach with specializations in low carbohydrate, high fat diets, otherwise known as the ketogenic diet. Today's topic, I want to focus on an issue that is actually really close to my heart, and that is how does somebody who's had a previous gout hit do the ketogenic diet. And back in April of 2016, I went to the doctor because I had a really severe pain in the first major knuckle in my foot of the big toe, and much to my surprise, I was diagnosed with gout. And then it was 3 years later, in 2019, that I was diagnosed as being pre-diabetic. And I've talked about the pre-diabetes thing in other videos, so I'll just summarize things here that I struggled for a while following the medical advice that I was given, the standard medical advice. And when I look back now, like I did this morning, into my medical records, and I compared when I was diagnosed with gout to when I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, remember that the majority of our medical establishment looks at our blood work with an attitude of single point analysis. So in my view, looking back on the gout diagnosis a long time ago, that should have been a tip off to the doctors then that they should have been looking at other factors in my blood besides the high degree of uric acid that was in there, to see if there were other things going on with my metabolics, which there were. So in any case, to make long story short, in 2016, I had the gout diagnosis. Then in 2019, I came up pre-diabetic, and I followed the doctor's advice for a while, which was basically a glorified standard American diet that they called the Mediterranean diet, but it still had carbohydrates in it. And it wasn't until I stumbled on a video by Dr. Sarah Hallberg, a TED Talk, that I realized what I should have realized all along, especially being a PhD biochemist, was that the reason that my condition was getting worse was because I was still eating carbohydrates. And so I shifted to a ketogenic diet. I reversed pre-diabetes in 52 days. But the issue of the gout still remains because nobody really knows that much about gout patients on the ketogenic diet. Virta Health knows some things about it, and then there's been some really high quality science that's been done that's shown that when you first shift onto a ketogenic diet, your uric acid tends to spike up, but then according to the papers, it drops back down to normal levels. Well, you're looking at somebody where that's actually not the case. So that's what I want to address today. And just recently, just a few days ago, I had my second ever in my life gout hit. And it made me realize a concern that I've had all along in this business. What about those of us that have a history of gout doing the ketogenic diet? And this presentation today, I'm going to talk about some of the science, but also this is a call to action. I hope that any of the doctors that see this, that study the ketogenic diet out in the world that I'm in now, will put their heads up and go, yeah, we need to address this. We need to know more about the people like me who are in the ketogenic lifestyle, who have high uric acid, all right, and have the potential of getting gout. One thing I would like to know is what the hell's going on with the uric acid? Why am I running chronically high? And I think I've been high probably with it most of my life, right? But I just didn't know because of the medical establishment's willingness, if you will, to only look at single point analysis, right? I think it's been there for a long time. And starting in 2019, when I was diagnosed as being pre-diabetic, I should have been having regular blood to look at the uric acid and track it and see what was going on. But I have more to say about that utilizing my own data in a few minutes. Let's cover some stats. There's over 8.3 million adults in the United States that have been diagnosed with gout. 4% of the U.S. adults. 6 to 8% of the U.S. adults have high uric acid. So the normal range for uric acid is now, again, depending on the doctor's office that you talk to, it's going to be between 3.5 milligrams per deciliter and 8 milligrams per deciliter. So 6 to 8% of the U.S. is running high uric acid of the adults, and that means they're on the high end of that range. That means they're running somewhere around 8, which is my case, and I'm going to come to that. Now, in terms of the medical establishment, everything that I've read, everything that I can find, makes an association between gout and chronic disease. And when I talk about association, remember what we're getting at there is the fact that these are correlation or epidemiological studies. I've seen no solid study that's peer-reviewed and high-quality science that shows a direct link between gout causing one of these other issues, or vice versa, like diabetes is causing the gout, or gout is causing the diabetes, right? I have found no papers along those lines. When I talk about associational things, what do I mean? I mean that when you look at somebody who has some kind of chronic disease, like metabolic syndrome, for example, and they are carrying this whole constellation of different issues, the likelihood that you're going to find gout as one of those issues is on the higher probability list. All right, that's what I mean when I say that. So you see an association between gout and diabetes, kidney disease, what other things, metabolic syndrome, people that have insulin resistance, like myself. All right, what does this mean? It means like if let's say that you live in an apartment that is sitting on top of a jewelry store, and you decide when you get up in the morning that you want to go get some coffee from the neighborhood deli, right? You go down the stairs and you go onto the sidewalk, and as you exit the door onto the sidewalk, you realize that somebody has just thrown a rock through the window of the jewelry store, and the alarm's going off. And right then and there, the cops show up, and they arrest you because you happen to be standing in front of the darn jewelry store. So that's an association. It doesn't mean that you robbed the jewelry store. Obviously, somebody else did. So the question is, we have the gout, we have the prediabetes, we have kidney disease, we have all this stuff, right? And we have all these things together. Just what the hell is the gout doing? Is it actually related to any of this? Or perhaps are there other reasons why we have high uric acid? The only meaningful connection that I've been able to find, and this is still an association, is there appears to be some kind of relationship between high urate, or to keep things simple, uric acid in the blood, and the regulation of our blood pressure. That's the only thing that I've seen that is even remotely convincing. Now, I was first diagnosed with gout in April of 2016. My uric acid, when they ran the blood, was at 8.1 mg per deciliter. All right, and the normal range based on that medical record should be between 3.5 and 8 mgs per deciliter. So I was at the high end, and I had this thumping thing on the knuckle of my big toe, right? That was super painful. I could like barely even walk on it. And they put me on, they gave me the option to take opioids, which I turned down, right? No. But I did opt for taking high strength ibuprofen, right? These were 800 milligram tablets. Now, since becoming pre-diabetic and shifting to the ketogenic diet and being a PhD biochemist, I have been uber anal about measuring all the biomarkers that I can. So I'm running bloods all the time, right? My blood glucose, fasting glucose, my glucose 1 and 2 hour after meals. I run my ketones, my average ketones for the last year and 2 or 3 months, whatever it's been since I've been on the ketogenic diet, is literally, the average is like 2.2, right? I have not been out of ketosis for the entire time I switched to this diet, I guarantee you. All right. And then I've also, last July, I went to look at my numbers because I've been tracking my A1C, right, to see it started at 5.8 and I brought it down to 4.8 in 52 days, right? But I go in and I track my blood every 3 months, besides the stuff that I do at home here. And in last July, the uric acid came up as 10.3 and freaked me out. So the first thing that I did was I started asking questions. Can you get a meter? And so I got the, what is this thing? The UA Sure meter here in the US, right? This is not as good a meter as you can get in Australia or that you can get in Europe, but I can't get those better meters. So this one has a reasonable amount of error in it, and I'm going to address that a little bit in the data I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. Then in December, I went back and did my blood again, because remember, I'm tracking all of this stuff. I'm uber anal about it, and every 3 months I go in and have my blood, except with COVID-19, I missed a 3-month date right now. But in December of 2019, not that long ago, my uric was at 8.3 mg per deciliter. It's on the high end, and that was a blood test, not the UA Sure meter. Then, on May 8th of this year, I came up with a gout hit in my right big toe again, all right? And over the course of 4 days, my uric, based on the UA Sure meter, was 8.5, 10.2, 8.4, and 8.5. Now, there is error in those numbers, for sure. I am not taking those numbers as the gospel truth, but I can take the pain in my foot as the gospel truth. However, here are some things that we know about being ketogenic and being on gout. According to high quality science that I have been immersed in the last few days, beta hydroxybutyrate should downregulate the inflammation, and I should be experiencing a significantly lower level of pain. And that is in fact what happened. I have not had to take any ibuprofen for this thing, and literally the gout hit only lasted for a couple of days. And so I'm really amazed by that result. And again, I think that is a beautiful part of the ketogenic diet, the fact that it reduces inflammation and seems to have, at least in my own N1 existence, a major impact on the gout. But the question remains, why did I get the gout in the first place? Because again, I'm really anal about the ketogenic diet and I'm really careful with it. So I'm pretty certain I'm not overeating the protein, right? I'm at 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight on it. Don't forget, I'm a health coach and I have to help people with this stuff. So I'm wondering, what is the situation? I know that uric acid in the blood, in terms of its concentration, or the urate, is pretty close to its solubility limit. So that's a question I'm putting out there to you guys. How do I get over the solubility limit with it? That's the question. All right, that's one of the questions. Now, I want to go to the data. So the first thing is, and I'm not going to show you the slide on this, I have fasting data going all the way back to July when I first did my blood work and came up with the high uric acid. And my average uric for that time period to now basically is 8.95. The confidence level on it is not all that great. There's a lot of scatter in it. Again, the UA Sure meter is not as good as the meters that you can get in Australia or Europe. And so I know there's a significant amount of error that's in that value. But what I do know is that even if you account for that error, it still puts me on the high end of the uric acid. So number one, I think I'm one of those individuals that's in the 6 to 8% of adults in the US that run high uric acid. And I think there's evolutionary reasons for it. I found good, solid papers in this area. And apparently around 24 million years ago, we had the first mutation that started to trash the uricase gene, all right? And then between 24 million to about 5 million years ago, there were 2 more mutations, and in humans, we no longer have the capability of breaking down uric acid into other components. We're not able to do that. And so as far as mammals go, we have an increased level of it. And the evolutionary hypothesis for the reason for those mutations was the idea that back in that time period, we went from having a really wet planet, lots of wetlands and lots of water around, to a situation where there was lots of savannas. It was very, very dry, and we had to operate in a world at that point where we were at low sodium. And the hypothesis is that the higher the urate compensated for the electrolyte balance in our systems and helped regulate our blood pressure to keep it where it should be in order to be functional. And I'm wondering if that isn't the case with the 6 to 8% of us that are running high uric acid, that we are the remnants of that. And that's the reason for the high uric acid. So what I'm going to do now is turn to some of the graphical data. Okay, shown here is a 4-hour time period where I'm measuring blood glucose, ketone levels, and uric acid. The uric acid is shown on near the bottom of the graph, and it are the red squares. The vertical line at 0.5 is the time point where I ate breakfast, eggs, sausage, and it was actually cream cheese. The units for the blood glucose, the ketones, and the uric acid have all been made the same at millimolar per liter, and then I doubled the value for the uric acid so that I could put it on the exact same graph as the ketones and the blood glucose. So to know the uric acid in the American units, you would take those values, divide them in half, and then you just need to convert to milligrams per deciliter, which along the line which is noted as 1 here is going to be 8 mg per deciliter. So what you can see in terms of the uric acid is that my fasting uric acid is usually the highest of the day. That is not always the case, but it is true most of the time. And then you can see that there is a pattern here. Whether it's real or not, I can't really comment on that, because that could be just literally scatter coming from the UA-Sure meter itself. But what I am certain about is at the end of the day, you can see that this final point here at the 4-hour time point is less than what we started at with the fasting. But we're still near the upper end of the normal range for uric acid. And I have data like this that extends well past 4 hours. I've been measuring this stuff starting with fasting and going throughout the entire day, and this type of pattern is consistent. Okay, shown here is an experiment where I looked at the effect on blood glucose, ketones, and uric acid with exercise over a 3-hour time period, and this experiment did not involve eating. So it was exercise that I did right after fasting values were taken. All right, and again, on the vertical axis on the left side, you can see the uric acid, which in this case is in the black boxes. The ketones are the red triangles, and the purple circles are the blood glucose. This is pretty cool data because you can see literally that the values that were taken immediately after exercise are what you expect. In other words, you can see that my blood glucose has spiked in response to the exercise itself, and this was a HIIT, so it was high intensity exercise with weight. All right, and you can see that the ketones have dropped there because of the fat utilization by my metabolism. And then interestingly, when you look at the uric acid, you can see that it gently rises over that time period as well. Over the course of the 3-hour time period, the ketones eventually rise up close to 4 millimole, and the blood glucose comes down so that it's a little bit below what my fasting level was. and eventually the uric acid returns to its baseline level. And again, what I want to point out here is that the baseline level of the uric acid is on the upper range once again for normal uric acid. And lastly, before I move to the next section, you can see that pattern again in the uric acid expression here. And again, I don't know if it's just the scatter in the meter, or if this is something that is real that I'm looking at. But again, that the final uric acid point is literally sitting on the upper end of the normal range for uric acid. To summarize my own personal data, for me, overall, since last July, it looks like my uric acid is highest in the morning when I get up, my fasting level of uric acid. And then sometimes it can spike up a little bit after the fasting value, but over the course of the day, in the late afternoon, it's usually at its lowest peak. The uric acid definitely fluctuates with exercise. So it looks like during an intense exercise session that it will rise a little bit, and then after that it decreases, similar to the other trends that I've seen over the rest of the course of the day. Though I didn't show the data for this, I see a correlation between the amount of salt that I eat and the uric acid level. So if I really push the salt over the course of a day, so I'm talking about eating like 7 or 8 grams of NaCl on top of whatever I'm putting on my food, I can drop my uric acid level off by 1 to 2 units. So instead of running at 8, it's going to run somewhere around 6. Again, not saying that those values are hard and fast, because there's a lot of error in the UA meter. All right, now, so to summarize and close my presentation, 6 to 8% of the adults in the U.S. are running high uric acid. I'm definitely one of them, and I'm one of the guys who popped up pre-diabetic and went on the ketogenic diet. So far, my experience after being on this diet for a little over a year is that it's safe to do if you have a history of gout. And the episode that I just had a few days ago lasted significantly less time than my original hit. Like, it only lasted a couple of days, literally, by comparison to 2 weeks when this happened in 2016. The pain was significantly less, apparently because the beta hydroxybutyrate inhibits the NLRP3 inflammasome. All right. So I didn't have to take any ibuprofen for the hit. I wasn't limping around, and in fact, I continued to exercise. So here are the questions that I have for the ketogenic scientists and doctors who are going to see this. All right. Is high uric acid a natural part of our biology? Maybe crystallization in a joint is the pathology of the other things metabolically that are going wrong with us when we're on a high carbohydrate standard American diet. The thing that I'm concerned about is that all the science that I've seen by the medical establishment on gout has been in individuals that are having diets that are high in carbohydrate. I think we really need to do some gout studies and uric acid studies on people who have been ketogenic for a long period of time, who are fully fat adapted, and we need to look at what's going on with the uric acid in those systems.